You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello, once again, to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained of Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And yep, we got another story about another witch, because you know that we find these crazy stories about witches and all these legends, and there's more witches than I ever knew existed.
And most of them are people who are kind of live away from the community. The rest of the community, they're considered the oddball. Mm-hmm. What else is new, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who does anything out of the ordinary that everyone else does is suddenly a heretic, a witch, whatever. You want to go ahead and start us off? This is about the Witch of Yazoo City, correct?
Yeah. So on May 25th, 1904, as legend has it, the woman whose name is not known, and they don't know her name still, she lived on the Yazoo River, and she would lure fishermen in and off the river and then torture them, apparently. The sheriff found some skeletons in her shed one day, and he wanted answers. So she fled, and a whole bunch of deputies followed her into the swamp. When they caught up to her, she was sinking in quicksand, and as she sunk to her death, she swore to return in 20 years and burn the town to the ground.
Nice.
Yeah. So, sounds pretty awful. So she was buried in Glenwood Cemetery, and a chain was placed around the grave to keep her spirit from coming back. And the witch, according to legend, died on May 25th, 1884, 20 years to the day before the Great Fire that destroyed the town, which leveled 200 homes and almost every business in Yazoo City. While the fire is said to have started in the kitchen of a young woman preparing for her wedding, there explains that there seems to be a vengeful force at work. So that's what was told by some witnesses. So while it's quite possible and certainly innocent enough, it's the strange and fierce winds that were blowing on that day, which was unusual for the time, that led many to blame the witch. So the flames were said by witnesses to have leaped through the air as if driven by some supernatural force. And when the people of the city made it to the lady's grave, the chain links were broken. So when a town completely burns to the ground, it's kind of a turning point, just a little bit of a marker there in history, kind of a little bit of a boat dock there. Regardless of what happened, you kind of want to think so, said Hill, who was probably one of the witnesses there. And Vay McGraw has played the witch on walking tours for 50 years. Her family also owns the funeral home that oversees the cemetery. And the strangest part, she said, is that nobody really knows who the witch is. She refers to her as the person who's buried there. The records burned in the 1904 fire, and there's no proof of anything, no cemetery records, she said. There's no record, but there is someone buried there. So Hill said that the legend of the witch is something that's been handed down for generations, and that records aren't needed to really keep her memory alive. When I was a child growing up here, it was something that on my mother's mind. She threatened me with it. So it's very fresh in my mind. My mother was born in 1912, so there you go. Starting at the beginning of the last century, it was going on for a while, and it filtered down to her. now, he said he still hears the children talking about the witch. He said he found that the children now, when they referred to her as the witch, they referred to her as the chain lady.
That's funny.
That is funny. The chain lady's been silent for many years now, but she'll always be a part of Yazoo city history. And her grave is in the cemetery and the historical reset that came with her. And the fire will always stand as proof that she, whoever she was, had always been there. And of course, the kids will always remember. And they'll say, "I'm not scared of the chain lady. I'm not scared of the chain lady." That's what McGraw said. So, what do you think about her?
This particular legend sounds to me more like an urban legend or urban myth locally than it does to have real factuals. Now, there could have been an old woman that the detectives chased into the swamp that, who knows what the bones were? They could have assumed maybe it was human. It just was odd that she had all these bones in her shed. But maybe she had pets and she kept bones. People do that when their pets die.
Well, maybe she wasn't right.
You mean like crazy?
Like mentally a little off.
A little Yazoo witch?
Now, Yazoo's in Louisiana. It's like a small...
I know, but if she's crazy Yazoo witch, she would keep bones in her shed.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, for her to even think about doing that, and she wasn't right, and she was running from them, maybe she was a little off, mentally off, and people didn't understand her.
Could be. Could just be some weird lone hermit woman that lived near the swamp, and they just, everybody likes to talk about the person they don't know anything about. They seem to know everything about them. You ever notice that?
Yeah. So why would they call her a witch? Did she do any herbal work for the community? Back then people depended on herbal people as well as doctors.
It's weird that she said, I'll burn this town down to the ground in 20 years. So to me, that sounds like the start of an urban myth. Because I think if you're a witch and you're cursing someone, you'd say, I'm going to make this town burn to the ground. Not, in 20 years, I'm going to make this town burn to the ground. That sounds like someone said, she said it, 20 years later, the town burned to the ground. They said, hey, didn't that crazy old woman who died in the swamp?
That's exactly what happened.
Then they start perpetuating the witch. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. She said that, maybe like you said, she was on a limb or had, a wild hair. She was crazy. She screamed at them, I'm going to burn this town to the ground, mark my words. And 20 years later, the town goes, wait a minute. Didn't that old woman that died in the swamp say she was going to burn the town down under a curse?
But if you're mentally off, you can say a lot of things. I mean,
I know, but I'm saying that's where it sounds like an urban legend would start.
She said something that they remembered it.
Yep.
And they forgot about her, probably just put it down. But then why would they bury her body with a chain link around if they didn't really believe it?
Well, let's put it this way. A, there's no record, so there's no way of knowing that she is actually buried there. Why would you bury this old crazy witch who died in quicksand? Wait, let me finish.
Okay, all
Why
right.
would you bury this crazy old witch in a cemetery next to the regular folks of the town who, upstanding? Why would you bury this crazy old witch woman in the middle of your cemetery? Why would you go to the trouble of paying for the cemetery plot, the headstone, and a special chain link around her grave that you assume is to do what?
Well, the lady claims that her family owns a cemetery, that there really is a body buried there.
Well, I'm sure there's a body there, but we don't know that it's
But we don't know
actually
who
the
it
woman.
is.
We don't know
Yeah.
that it's the woman. We don't even know that that's what that chain link is for.
Now,
You know what
these
I'm
days,
saying?
can't you exhume a body and take the DNA and find out who it could be?
Well, you could exhume the body and get the DNA, but if you don't have records, you can't really compare the records and DNA to anybody. You could maybe try and find a current relative, but that's still not going to tell you anything about the woman.
That's true. It's better than nothing. Since the town burned, there's no records.
I'm just saying it's more like saying, it's like choosing a grave, saying, oh, well, this one has a chain around it. They must have buried her, and they put the chain there to keep her in the ground so she won't come back.
Well, all I can say is if they went through that trouble after her dying, then there was some part of them that were scared and believed her.
Yeah.
But then people
Well,
back
and we
then
know-
they believed in a lot of folklore and myths, and
Yep.
I think people back then were very easily spooked by that kind of stuff.
I agree. They would
Yeah.
fill in a lot that's not there just to justify what it is that they're looking at, talking about, or experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
They'll fill in the blanks. Whatever's not there, they will say, well, it must be this and this. It's funny because that's how a lot of investigation ghost TV shows do it, where they're thinking, oh, this EVP said this, so it must be this. It must be this person from 1912 who said this.
Now, how could a kitchen fire burn down a whole town?
It did in San Francisco.
A kitchen fire?
Ham and eggs fire, that's what caused the Great Fire of San Francisco.
Oh, wow, okay.
Didn't you know that? There's your go. There's your example.
That's a interesting how far that can go. Wow, okay.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, there's a corner that you can stand on. You can see where the house, you can't see the house, but the corner is where the house used to be, where this woman left her ham and eggs on the stove and it caught fire, and that's where it started the fire. The earthquake was the earthquake, but the fire is what really destroyed San Francisco. It wasn't the earthquake.
Right.
But it's because ham and eggs. It was a woman's ham and eggs on a little house.
Oh, good
in
Lord.
her
She wasn't
kitchen.
paying attention to her cooking. Okay.
So I guess in answer to your question, yes, a kitchen fire can destroy a whole town.
Yeah, well, it's, yeah, it's, and then, of course, they're going to remember what she said. They probably just, well, I don't think they put it down to her just being crazy if they went through the trouble of, like I mentioned, burying her with a chain around her. But I've never heard of a chain link keeping a spirit from walking. I've heard other...
I've seen pictures of this grave, by the way, and it's literally posts, like 3 or 4 on each side long ways and like 2 or 3 short ways, right? And the headstone's at one end, and this thing is literally almost a complete rectangle. And it literally is just little chains going from one little post to the next. It isn't like chain links. It's literally just chains going through these posts.
Now, what gets to me about this whole thing, and you don't read about this in the article, okay, they said that she had these bones buried in her shed. Why didn't they take the bones and examine them and find out who they belonged to and inform the family and try to do a tracing on what really happened?
They could. I mean, she already sank into the quicksand, so it's not like they got someone to take in for
Well, to get
for
closer to the
crimes.
family, figure out what happened to them, what she did.
I don't know. It's almost like it's from the gist I got is they found the bones in her shed, thought it was odd. They didn't say human, they just said bones, I noticed.
Okay.
Thought, well, this is really strange. Let's go question the woman. And then she ran and they had to chase her. So does that mean she was crazy and she did do something crazy? We don't know. We won't know.
So obviously she was known in the town as somebody who was a little odd, and nobody really, I mean, it sounds like she was left alone pretty much before all this happened.
Maybe.
But if she was angry at the town, maybe they treated her like garbage.
Yeah, this wouldn't be the first witch and it wouldn't be the first town.
No, it wouldn't be. So,
I don't know. I just, and it's funny because it says that in 1904, that's when the fire happened that leveled the town. And this woman said her mother was born in 1912. Years later, of course, by that time the urban myth is perpetuated. The town burned.
Yeah.
It's all because of the witch. So her mother uses it as a cautionary tale to discipline her. So it's a local folklore, essentially. It might have basis of truth. A lot of folklore does have some pillars of truth in them, but there's a lot of filling in too.
and of course, this one you can't go back and look. I don't know about the town's newspapers, or there wouldn't be any if there was a fire that destroyed the
It
records.
destroyed the records. It destroyed the town, and it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about. I don't know if there's any relatives. If a woman had any relatives that were still around, it's.
Sounds like kind of a sad, lonely life to me.
It is. She lived next to the swamp. She obviously, like I said, everybody knows everything about you. The ones that they know nothing about.
That's true.
And
It's
then-
true.
And then they want to tell everyone else how horrible you are because they know everything about you.
I mean, even today in cities and towns, we have what they call, excuse me, and I don't mean to say this, their local weirdo
Yeah.
that everybody won't go near. They think they're a weirdo, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden they know about them.
Well, yeah, because one person says something to another person, that person says something to us. Oh my God, my
Right.
friend just told me about this person.
Right. And and of course, as we all know what it's like to be different and to be considered a little different than the rest of people. I'm not talking about people who are different and feeling a little cast off. I know that feeling very well.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people who have this weird energy about them, and they act a little off. I've seen a little off. I've seen people like that, and even my mother, growing up in Mexico, had stories about their town's weirdos. And she told me some stories too, and I mentioned one of them to my brother, and he laughed his head off about that. He remembered it.
So this is, I was curious, I wanted to look back. So the sheriff found skeletons in the witch's shed. So it doesn't just say bones, it says skeletons.
Skeletons, yeah.
Now, most people, when they refer to, oh my God, they found a skeleton in the shed, they're not saying, oh my God, they found a dog skeleton in the shed. Most humans are going to think, if you use the word skeleton, you're implying a human skeleton. Otherwise, you say, oh my God, they found dog bones in the shed. That's what most people would probably say, or animal bones. They found animal bones in the shed. No, this is the sheriff found skeletons in the witch's shed and wanted answers.
Right, and of course, and anybody would want answers, but I'm just saying, after they did that big chase and she apparently cursed them out.
But why would the witch say, okay, I'm dying in quicksand, you've chased me, I fell into the quicksand in the swamp, I'm going to die any second, and just because you forced me into the quicksand to die, I decided I'm going to come back in 20 years. I don't know why she thought she'd wait 20 years to come back to do this, to burn the town down. Why not? I'm going to come back and burn the town to the ground and come back the next year.
Well, let's put it this way. She probably wasn't thinking in her right mind. If you're in quicksand, you're desperate, and you're in pain, you just say whatever comes to your mind. You don't think about it.
And why is there a headstone with this grave and the chain link, and there's nothing written on the headstone? Isn't that a little weird?
Because they don't know her name.
But isn't that a little strange, though?
I think it's a little strange.
Wouldn't you put like the Yazoo Swamp Woman or something on the
Put
marker?
some kind of memory to her. Yeah. And
crazy bad who fell in quicksand and cursed and burned our town down. That's a little long for the headstone.
Isn't Yazoo City kind of a small city in Louisiana? It's like supposed to be very.
Look it up. You could probably.
I am looking it up right now, and it seems to be a very small. Well, I guess it's not so small. It used to be smaller, I guess.
Yeah, I could see this woman as a tour guide playing her, because that would make a lot of sense, where you would tell your own story.
Of course, there's probably a lot of history, and they probably have a lot of reenactments and things like that. A lot of these places in Louisiana do, because there's so much history
like
there.
I love the tour guides where they play characters and recreate their stories and stuff. I think it adds to the dramatic element of the history.
I think so too. So, well, anyway, they claim, and here's an interesting story. They said that that a yellow fever epidemic struck Yazoo City in 1853, but during the American Civil War, a makeshift shipyard was established on the Yazoo River at Yazoo City after the Confederate loss of New Orleans. The shipyard was destroyed by Union forces in 1863, but the Confederates soon recovered Yazoo City. Union forces returned the following year, and this time burned down almost the entire town. It was rebuilt, but yellow fever struck and took more victims in 1878, and on May 25th, 1904, a fire destroyed much of central Yazoo, and according to a local legend, the fire was caused by a witch avenging her death. And in reality, a boy playing with matches accidentally set a house ablaze. Now, they skipped that part.
Yeah, they did. I know sometimes you'll find different information in different sources. What's interesting, though, is that the Confederates burned it down? In, what was it, 1864? That's it?
Yeah.
So it burned down before. So this town has a history of it burning to the ground.
Yeah.
The Confederates burned it to the ground. They rebuilt it, and in 1904 it burned again. So, they obviously you can blame the Confederates the first time. And if this kid had matches, he might have started the fire. And of course, it's easy to blame the witch.
But blame the witch, yeah.
Yeah, other than Junior, who decided to play with matches one day. That's interesting, though, that...
And they said in 2010 it was struck by 2 tornadoes. So this town has been through
Yeah,
I've been through a lot.
I don't think I'd want to live in Yazoo.
I'd like to visit it, though.
Well, what's left of it? You better in between buildings.
Well, I'm sure it's fine, but I would like to visit that cemetery and visit the town, because I'd like to see the history in there, so.
Yeah, Louisiana.
But but actually, in reality, of course, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I kind of feel sorry for that woman. If she really did hurt some people, and she hid some skeletons in her shed, and she was hurting people, I don't feel that sorry for her. But if she
Yeah.
was just an outcast that nobody bothered to care about or remember her name,
Yeah.
I always have sympathy for people like that. How lonely it must be for them to be.
But like I said, the sheriff he said skeletons in her shed. He could have saw animal bones and just assumed they were skeletons.
He could have.
So,
They would have to, they should inspect, I don't know, maybe they try to inspect it, maybe she got all defensive, who knows?
this reminds me of the episode we did, Half Hanged Mary.
Oh, yeah.
Very similar to this. And also the one we just did, Julia Brown,
Oh, Julia Brown, yeah.
the Voodoo Queen, also in Louisiana.
But at least they knew her name.
Yeah, but again, she lived in the swamp. She was kind of an outcast. She did
Exactly,
a lot of,
exactly.
it's interesting what people don't know. They tend to go after and blame everything on. It's easier to blame someone else than it is to take responsibility for your own problem.
Or for a real incident that happened, yeah. I bet you this is not going to be the last so-called witch we're going to find.
No,
With
I'm
some
sure.
story, with some history of the town, so,
Yep, I agree.
yeah.
All right, folks, there's another witch story for you. Like we don't do those often on the Ecto Portal. We find quite a bit, but we
Yep.
try to bring them out every once in a while and talk about them and compare them to each other, and find similarities and things that might be true, things that maybe were actually happened versus things that might have happened.
Yeah,
But I think they're interesting to talk about and discuss the relative truthfulness of the stories. Is it urban legend? Did anything actually really happen? And was it misconceived or misconstrued? And we just like to talk about them.
do you have a local witch in your town? We'd like to hear about it.
Is she still alive?
Is she still alive, or is it, or whatever legend? It would be cool to hear about it,
It would.
yeah.
All right, folks, that's it for this week on Ecto Portal. And until next week, we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Bye, see you next week.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.